Let us first of all ask ourselves why Africa is the way it is. The good Professor Aseka will know that there is always the tendency to historicize the problem of Africa. That Africa has throughout the ages been victimized in many ways. Africa was victimized through slavery, and it's not lost on me that you'll be going to Elmina and the Cape Coast. When you go to Elmina and the Cape Coast Castle, you'll be able to see the apology that is now emblazoned on the wall at Cape Coast, where the Africans apologize for the evil that they perpetrated, because Africans sold Africans. If you look at the early historians, they arrogantly told us that they discovered Lake Victoria and named it Victoria. They discovered the Victoria Falls, notwithstanding that the people in that area long knew it as the Mosi Otunya Falls. That they discovered Mount Kilimanjaro, they discovered Mount Kenya, they discovered the source of the Nile. And our education system was also structured to give credence or to lend credence to that new reality. It is as if we never existed. And when the colonial project lost its luster in 1945, that is not to say that there was always resistance throughout Africa. The Africans did not go down without a fight. Whether it was in the West, in the East, in the South, in the center, Africans fought. But the most important thing is that the process of decolonization started in earnest. And one can almost hear the words spoken on the 6th day of March in 1957 by Ghana's Dosage for Kwame Nkrumah, where he says that although Ghana is free, the freedom will mean nothing until it is linked to the total liberation of Africa. But no sooner had the colonial project stopped than the new project started in earnest, the neo-colonial project. And it's not lost on me that immediately after that, the erstwhile colonial powers started a process of elimination of the leaders who had emerged. So that as early as 1960, in Togo, Silvanus Olympio is removed from power. In 1961, Patrice Emery Lumumba in the Congo is assassinated by Mobutu and Kasavubu and Moise Tshombe. After that, we see the collapse of countries. Those of you who are younger will not know this, but courtesy of history, you should know Modibo Keita is gone in Mali. In Nigeria, Nnamdi Azikiwe, Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, the Saadana of Sokoto, Sahamadu Bello are eliminated and assassinated. In Ghana, Dosage for himself is eliminated. The neo-colonial project is alive and well, but the tragedy is that in the month of May in 1963, Kwame Nkrumah had warned the leaders when he spoke the 32 leaders who are present, heads of states and government in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. He told them, if we do not come out of here with a single government, with a single army, with a single currency, each one of us will go. because the neo-colonial project is alive and well. And our erstwhile colonial masters are going to do anything and everything to ensure that we do not succeed. But they did not listen to him. They had ears, but they did not listen. So that today, when I listen to many of us talking about the Pan-African movement, sometimes we do so as if it was a new thing. It is not new. Sometimes I hear when the American President Barack Obama went to Ghana and said something about Africa, it is as if he said something new. It is not new at all. Kwame Nkrumah had said it before. In 1960, Sir Albert Lutuli had spoken about it. Robert Sobukwe had spoken about it in 1960. Many people had spoken about it, but the African problem is that of low self-esteem. And until the day that we conquer and exercise the spirit of low self-esteem, will never realize our potential. How can it be that our continent is so rich yet so poor? How can it be that our continent is so endowed, but yet our sons and daughters live in liberation? How can it be there are people who are so colonized and abused now have our sons and daughters drowning in the sea, going back to the same people who colonized her? How can it be that a land that was so traumatized now has her best men and women sending their wives to give birth in the United States of America that they may acquire American citizenship? How can it be that a land that is so endowed has its most educated men playing the lottery that they may get green card to go to the United States of America? How can it be? There must be something that is wrong about us. And time has come that we must interrogate it. Is it a spiritual problem? When you look at the Bible, for every king, there was a man of God constantly pricking their conscience. If I'm wrong, that is how I understand John the Baptist and Herod. When he stands out in the agora and tells Herod, it is not right that you should have an affair with the wife of thy brother Philip, his wife Herodias. That is how I understand the interaction between Elijah and Ahab and Jezebel. That they are the spirit that always questions their doing. That is how I understand the relationship between Samuel and Saul. That is how I understand the relationship between Nathan and David, when he tells David, in your kingdom there were two men, one who was very rich and the other one who only had a lamb. And the one who was rich on one day, when a visitor came, it is the lamb of the single lamb of the poor one that he took. And David says, if there is such a man in my kingdom, he shall be punished, and he shall pay 4 times over. And Nathan tells him, that man, your majesty, is yourself. You've taken the wife of Uriah the Hittite and caused him to die by the sword of the Ammonites. The sword shall never depart from your house. Today, when I drive across the city, I see all manner of posters with all manner of magicians promising many things to politicians: how to win elections, how to become wealthy. Is it possible that our politicians and our so-called leaders pray with us in the pulpit during the day and they second guess God at night? These are the questions that Africans must ask. Are we decided to worship God, or we are worshiping Mammon?
Amen.
Are we worshiping Baal, or we are worshiping God? Because we can preach and pray until the second coming and nothing will change. When the 21st century came, it was said, this is the century for Africa. We are now getting into a good part of the 21st century. Let me just look at Africa for you. From South Africa, the Guptas are capturing the state. Country that was inherited with wealth. Young men and women have no jobs. Zimbabwe, that land that was so courageously seized from Ian Smith. The man who helped seize it is now destroying it. 90% unemployment. The man who is an octogenarian, 90 years of age, but he refuses to leave the stage. No matter how good a dancer you are, you must leave the stage, but he refuses. You've just said that his wife, not Sally, but the other one, Grace. Sally was much more decent, the Ghanaian lady. Says that we shall keep him in power even if the people of Zimbabwe suffer. That is the Africa that we are praying about, because we must know the state of Africa. You go to Mozambique, that land of great men, Samora Moses Machel, Joaquim Chissano, Eduardo Mondlane. One man who never loses an election. If he loses, it has been rigged. Alphonse Jakama cannot allow that country to rest. You go to Angola, that land of NATO. It's good that Dos Santos has now agreed that he's leaving. He's been sick. But even when he is sick, there is no hospital in Luanda to which he goes. He goes to seek treatment in Madrid, Spain. That is the state of Africa that you are talking about. And there are Christians there and they are praying on a daily basis. Why is it that God appears not to be listening? You go up there to Equatorial Guinea, that land of Mashas Nguema Biongo, who describes himself as el unico miraclo, the unique miracle. A land that notionally has the highest per capita income in Africa, but poverty abounds. They are preponderantly Catholic and they pray on a daily basis. But why is it that the God that we serve appears to be silent? Go to the Democratic Republic of Congo, that land that is the richest resource country in the world. If there were ever ingredients for greatness, Congo is it. It has all the resources in the world. Every mobile phone that you have has rare earth from Congo. Yet they cannot hold an election because they have no money. But in the intervening period, $750 million disappears from the president's office. They are now generating refugees into Angola, into Zambia, and into other neighboring countries. Why is it that a country that is 80% Christian, praying on a daily basis, continues to wallow in peace, in sorrow and lamentation? Central African Republic, where there is a veritable war between the anti-Balakas and the Selekas, formed as Muslims and Christians. Even the war is forgotten. It never occupies the pages of any newspaper today. What is happening there? Sudan, our youngest country, the Nuer are rising against the Dinka against the Nuer. The leaders don't even trust their country. The leaders, all their children are either going to school here, or in Australia, or in the United Kingdom, or in Kampala. Juba has become a hunting ground where they go and get the antelope and slaughter her and eat her meat. And they pray. Why is it we must pose to ourselves that there appears to be no answer from the heavens? And my answer is very simple. We are in a constant state of mocking God. And the God that we worship cannot be mocked. So until the day that we as a people make a conscious decision to move in the right direction. I go to church sometimes and there is very convenient theology that all leadership comes from God. Nonsense. All leadership does not come from God. Go and read today the book of the prophet Isaiah, Hosea, chapter 8, verse 4. He says, you raise unto yourselves kings and princes that I have not approved.
Amen.
Those who want that convenient and self-serving and politically correct statement are quick to refer to the book of Romans chapter 13, verse 1, that all authority must be obeyed. But they forget that Paul was writing to Rome where Caesar was a god. And Paul explains himself, if you doubt, in his first book to the Corinthians, at chapter 9, verses 19, he says that I became a Jew for those who are Jews. To those who did not follow the law, I followed the law. To those who did follow the law, I followed the law. I was something for everything that I may win souls. So we must understand Paul's letter in the context in which they were written. And that is why he says, I like the Christians of Berea. Because once I preach to them, they will go back to the text and ask themselves, did I preach the correct thing? We must ask ourselves. You know, when I hear people saying all leadership comes from God and they are doing it from the pulpit, I get so irritated. Did Adolf Hitler come from the God? Did Idi Amin come from God? Did Pol Pot come from God? Did Foster come from God? Did Ian Smith come from God? Did Maduro come from God? Did Marcius Ngoma come from God? God permits it as a punishment to you who do not follow him. So, fellow Christians, fellow Kenyans, fellow Africans, beyond the agony, we must organize. How are we going to organize? By recognizing that the speaker of the word and the doer of the word are part of the relay team. There are those whose duty it is to say, and there are those whose duty it is to do. Combined, they win the race. Because if I understand Christ well, in the beginning there was the Word. The Word is the incubator of action. So never ignore the Word. The very Bible itself, we call it the Word. How can we possibly ignore it? It is in the womb of the Word that action is born. Even this peace that we are talking about, peace is a good thing, but peace is a child of the intercourse between justice and truth. Peace does not exist in a vacuum. You can pray for peace until the second coming, but if you are unjust, we'll know no peace. When the World War I ended, the tribal war in Europe called the World War ended, they said that there will be no other war. But there was another war. And there have been other wars. Wherever there is injustice, there will always be war and violence. But wherever there is justice and truth, there will always be peace and tranquility. So as we speak about peace, let us talk about justice. And when we talk about justice and we have justice, then that peace that you, men of God, always dismiss us with when we leave the church. The peace of God that surpasses all understanding will break out of the yoke of justice and truth. But when we trade in injustice and trade in lies and call for peace, it's like asking an elephant to beget a mosquito. Shall never come to pass. Here in Kenya, we have elections on the 8th day of August. This is a great country with great people in prospect. Those of you who have had the advantage of traveling across Africa, you'll find Kenyans working in Namibia. One of the biggest contractors in Botswana is a Kenyan. You find them in Monrovia, you find them in Ghana, in Nigeria, everywhere. The only problem we have in Kenya is the quality of the men and women who lead us. When I look at the horizon, none of them, and I say dear fear without fear of contradiction, none of them deserve to lead us. But unfortunately, they are the only ones in the market. They are the only ones to which the Kenyan electorate respond, and we are stuck with them for the next 5 years. But I look forward to the day, and that day will come when we shall be rid of them. And men and women who fear God, men and women who love this country will have the opportunity to serve. Tanzania's Mwalimu Julius Nyerere used to say, if you see men who are captured in the 5 Ps, they do not deserve to be leaders. As I look at all those who have offered themselves to be our leaders, they seek power for its own sake. They seek popularity for its own sake. That is why they transport voters to their rallies. They seek property for its own sake. That is why they engage in primitive accumulation of wealth. They are stealing on an industrial scale. They seek prestige for its own sake. That is why they want to be surrounded with 200 guards when a police station in our whole county has no more than 50 guards. Seek pomposity for its own sake. That is why they have some of the longest motorcades known anywhere in the world. Africa will only be great when we do the right things. So Christians, Kenya can be great. Because if Kenya is great, Africa will be great. You know, sometimes I wonder, what is it that the African leaders discuss when they meet in Addis Ababa? Shouldn't the conference in Addis Ababa going forward only have the following agenda items, only 4 meetings? Meeting number 1 with a single agenda item, what is wrong with us? And we go home and reflect. The second meeting, what can we do about what is wrong with us? Then we go home and reflect. Then the third meeting, what do we do about it? And the fourth meeting, we've now recognized what is right and we begin implementation. It is only then that Africa Agenda 2063 will have a meaning. You know, a few weeks ago, Africa had a slot in the Security Council of the United Nations. And you know the country that they elected? The Democratic Republic of Congo. The world said, what is wrong with you? This is a country that is men, women are being raped in Congo on a daily basis. Young boys and girls are child soldiers now. Men are being sodomized. And you elect this country to be in the Security Council to decide these things. What kind of people are you? So let us listen very keenly, because this continent has to be great. And it will only be great if we do certain things. One of them is to deal with our self-esteem. You know, about 2 weeks ago, the Nation newspaper headline, under headline, Rooney rocks Gor Mahia. Rooney is an English football player who is praised much by the English but has never succeeded very well on the international scene. He occupied the front pages of our leading newspaper, and I sent a message to the managing director, should this be the headline? Because an African football player, whether he is Wea or Wanko Kanu, would never be on the headline of the Guardian newspaper. Lakini tunawatetemekea wazungu. About a week ago or 2 ago, the Chinese owner of Alibaba, Jack Ma, was in town. And I drove on my way to Buruburu and Jogo Road. There was emblazoned an advert, Jack Ma, at the University of Nairobi. Jack Ma of Alibaba, trade on the internet. Jack Ma. And I told the clergy at St. James, half in jest, tongue in cheek, that don't be surprised if at the next baptismal, a mother will be asked, and to which name do you give this child? And the mother and the father and the godparents will say unanimously, Jack Ma Onyango. Yet I remember one day, here in Nairobi, the great Wole Soyinka was here. And he could not raise an audience at the University of Nairobi, Taifa Hall. I remember about a year ago, the young, prodigious Nigerian writer Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie was here. She could not raise an audience. Yet I know another African that is great, that is present in 18 African countries, the richest man in Africa, Aliko Dangote of Nigeria. If he came here at the University of Nairobi and any other university would ignore Aliko Dangote. Yet he employs more Africans than any other person in the world. If South Africa's Patrick Motsepe or Nigeria's Tony Elumelu want to come here, some of the richest, you would not even recognize them. Our media would not even attend the meetings that they are at. Tunawatetemekea wazungu. Tunajidunisha mbele ya wazungu. Na hilo ndilo tatizo letu. Few days ago, Tanzanian President John Pombe Magufuli said, sisi tunalima pamba. Tukisha lima pamba, tunatuma pamba Ulaya. Wanatengeza nguo. Wakisha vaa na kuchoka navyo, wanaviweka kwenye marobota. Wanatutumia Afrika tuvae. Wakati imewadia tulime pamba yetu, tutengeze nguo zetu, tuvivae, tukisha choka tuwatumie na wao wavae.
That's right.
That is what will begin to make Africa great again. It cannot be right that you and me are wearing second-hand underwear. That you and me and our wives and our daughters are wearing second-hand underwear and braziers. It cannot be right. We must do something about it. We must do something about it. When Christ says, love your neighbor as you love yourself, we don't love ourselves. How can it be that what other civilizations have rejected is what we consider new? How many of you have you heard say, I'm going to buy a new second-hand car, a contradiction in terms of paradox. Yet we say, even you and me who have gone to school, one day, at the airport in Dar es Salaam, sitting waiting to come to Nairobi, I met a clergyman wearing the dog's collar. And we got into a conversation. He was a Catholic father. And he said something that I will never forget. He said, and we were conversing in Kiswahili, he said, ndugu, unajua Mungu hawaiti wanaostahili. Mungu anawastahilisha anaowaita. And I thought that was very deep. So in this African thing, Mungu atawaita wanaostahili, atawastahilisha anaowaita. And those of us who are here today, we are not here because we are good. Even when we go to church, I keep on saying, and I've said it before, that when we are in church, we are not the good ones. We are the bad ones. The only difference between us and those who do not go to church is that we are sick, and we know we are sick. We are suffering from acquired immune spirituality syndrome, and our spiritual CD count is low. And we go to church every Sunday and Saturday to get our spiritual antiretroviral. The difference is that those who are out there, they are sick and they do not know that they are sick, or if they do know, they do not care. So those of us who have sinned and fallen short of the glory of both God and man, and have this calling, let us take care of Africa. For selfish reasons, because Africa must be great, and for altruistic reasons, because our children and children's children are going to stay in this continent. This continent can't be great. And luckily today, the African Union has something that is called Agenda 2063. That Agenda 2063 tells me that in 50 years' time, there will be an electric railway running from Addis Ababa, Ethiopia to Dhaka in Senegal, a dual carriageway, another one from Cape Town to Cairo, another one from Swakin in the Sudan to Luanda in Angola, that the Democratic Republic of Congo will be the equivalent of Silicon Valley. Nairobi, Kenya will be the financial sector jointly with Abidjan in Côte d'Ivoire. There'll be pipelines. There'll be a major solar farm in Brukana. Africa will be great. There'll be no visa. You'll take a bus, a shuttle, without visa from Liberia, Monrovia to Algiers in Algeria. Our goods will not be stopped at Namanga, no, there'll be no borders. Nobody will ask you for a yellow fever certificate because diseases will have been conquered. There'll be no yellow fever. There'll be no cholera in 5-star hotels like we have in Nairobi now. There'll be no mosquitoes. The only mosquitoes that will exist are the mosquitoes that we have bred for our own scientific purposes. There'll be no shortage of maize because we'll not depend on rain. We'll all be irrigated. Our young men and women will leave school and they'll either create jobs that we have created jobs. There'll be security. So that we do not have to buy security equipment from the Americans and the Europeans. There'll be peace. That Africa is possible. It is possible if there is a union between the leadership and the clergy. You clergy, you do not know the role that you play. And sometimes I fear for you. I fear that on the day of judgment, you'll be judged very harshly, more than some of us. Because you have a captive audience every Sunday and every Saturday and every day. What do you do with them? How do you nourish their hearts? God has constituted you into shepherds. Are you shepherding your sheep in the right direction? This is the question. Because remember, God says that you may come to Him on that day, and He says, I know you not. You do not speak for the heavens, but I suspect you, clergymen, will be judged on a slightly higher scale. And as I said, and this is what I conclude with, we live in a continent where we pretend to be in democracy. There is no democracy. What we have in these countries is not democracy. This is confusion.
Tell it.
This is confusion. The fact that we have periodic 5-year elections, that is not democracy. You know, I hear people saying that from first world, third world to first world, Lee Kuan Yew was a dictator. Lee Kuan Yew was a dictator in Singapore, a benevolent dictator. Mahathir Mohamad was a dictator. Park Chung-hee in South Korea was a dictator. Atatürk was a dictator in Turkey. In other words, let us give relevant examples. In other words, let us ask ourselves whether we want to run this government where everybody has an opinion, even when the opinion is the most stupid opinion, and we've got to listen to them. We must make a choice. Kenya cannot be governed because when you make a step, somebody emerges from the wood with ideas that have no business being considered. Yet in the name of some perverted democracy, we've got to listen. And this democracy which is ethnicized, how many of you have read Koigi Wamwere's The Word Genocide in Kenya, the Curse of Negative Ethnicity? If you haven't read him, I'm submitting to us that you leaders, church leaders, you have a duty. And the duty is to be found in the scriptures. If you go to the book of Mark, you'll find the story. And the story is that, as I said a little earlier, of John the Baptist. There are times when you can go into the agora, and your agora is the pulpit, and use that agora and tell the leadership you are engaged in corruption. According to Ernst & Young 2017 report, Kenya is the 6th most corrupt nation on earth and the first in Africa. Tell the leaders that it's wrong to be thieves. You cannot continue to steal on an industrial scale, as Boima, the Liberian, says. Boima Fangule of Liberia. When you do that, remember that there is no shortage of Salomes who will be persuaded by Latter-day Herodiases to ask for your nets. Are you prepared? Are you prepared to be martyrs for Africa? Because Martin Luther King Jr. is right. If you have not found anything to die for, you are not worth living. So that is one way. And you must determine when it is best to use that way. But there is another way. And it works best. Because men and women have egos. It is the way of Nathan. I've always said that before you do the way of John the Baptist, do the Nathan way first. Go to the king and tell him, "Oh king, there were 2 people in your kingdom." Give them that story and tell them. If they do not listen, then you rebuke them publicly. So choose you now. I look forward in Accra, Ghana, at which, God willing, I'll be present, that one of the outcomes will be a communique, a petition addressed to all the heads of states of government, the 54 of them, which will be transmitted to all of them, and a torch that will run from country to country, to be received by each of those presidents and heads of government saying that Africa must change. To me, that should be the outcome in Elmina. Think about it. It is not for me to organize your conference for you, but those thoughts of mine, 120 cents, should find a place in your consideration. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to be with you today. The wisdom of such occasions has always been, ignore the messenger, receive the message. God bless you.